Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Brett Hoogeveen joining us. Brett is a co-founder of BetterCulture, a technology and training company intently focused on making the world a better place to work. That's a really great goal. He's a former engineer, an experienced healthcare executive, a coach, consultant, trainer, entrepreneur, startup investor, and a keynote speaker. Welcome to the show, Brett.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Excellent. I ask all my guests this question. Please give us the elevator pitch version of your story.
The elevator pitch. I am, as you mentioned there in the quick intro, I'm kind of a numbers guy originally. I always liked math and science and thought I would go off and have a career in engineering. Civil engineering is what I studied. And then I didn't love that. I thought maybe I'd switch to finance or business or something like that. And just couldn't find the right fit. And it wasn't until probably 15, 16 years ago, I was really struggling trying to find what I wanted to do with my life. And when I shifted from thinking about what I wanted to do to the type of company I wanted to work for, that made all the difference. And that was really sort of what flipped the switch for me, realizing the power of workplace culture, of working for a great team, working for a great organization, and how much value that adds, not just to businesses, but to people's lives. And so along that path, I decided I should try to help other organizations and other people create that same realization that I've had. And so started a training company called Mindset originally, and more recently, more of a technology-enabled consulting and training company called BetterCulture, where we are trying to help the world be a better place to work.
Excellent. Well, culture is one of my favorite subjects to talk about because it is so incredibly impactful on the work environment, but also the bottom line of your business. So it is not yours, Brett, but yours, meaning the listeners, everybody's business. Yours included, but everybody's. Brett, if you had to pick one event in your life that really put rocket boosters behind your career journey, what would that be?
I would say it's probably 6 or 7 years ago. I had been running a training company. I'd been doing consulting work, but I did it in a fairly insular way. I'm based in the Omaha, Nebraska market, and most of my clients were local. Joining a national group called the National Speakers Association was something that really changed my perspective on what it can look like to be a thought leader, to be someone who is trying to create change, etc. And so really joining a national group of people who are professional speakers, authors, etc., and learning from that group all of the ways to try to spread a message more broadly out there into the world and make an impact. In addition to just building great content and doing great training, I realized there's a lot more to really making an impact on the world than just producing great content. And so I think that's probably been the thing in the last 6 or 7 years. Now I do much more speaking. I've become more comfortable putting myself out there in the marketplace as an authority and saying, no, this is what more people need to hear because it'll be good for them and good for their businesses.
That's awesome. So the organization was really the wraparound. It kind of wrapped its arms around you and gave you that confidence to move forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, they have a national conference that are for people that want to build businesses as speakers. And I went and I attended and I thought, holy cow, there are, over 1,000 people just like me. And you see people on stage that just are fantastic messengers as well as great business owners and consultants and coaches. And it was very inspiring. It definitely raised sort of the ceiling of what I thought maybe I could and should be doing.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to your TEDx talk at the end of the show because I'm really interested in the topic of your TEDx talk as a former chief executive.
Good.
It's something like the dumb things chief executives do, but we'll get to that later. But
Okay.
let's start with culture. Culture means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What does organizational culture mean to you?
Well, I tell you, I think it means a lot. I mean, from a value perspective, culture means, I think a lot of people can't connect or don't obviously connect business metrics to culture, but culture is connected to everything from how your employees feel about the company, their daily motivation and productivity. It's connected to how your customers experience your business. It's customer retention and satisfaction. It's connected to product quality. It's connected to, let's see, what it's connected to your workers' compensation costs. It's connected to your safety ratings. It's connected to, if you're a group health plan, it's connected to how your employees spend your own group health plans dollars. It's connected to so many things that people don't realize it's actually connected to. And so I define culture as the attitudes and the behaviors that a group of people come to expect from one another. And that's really important from our perspective, Andrew, is that I believe that if you want to have a better culture, you've got to really be more focused on attitudes and behaviors than just platitudes or nice feeling sayings, because really your culture is not what people want it to be. It's how they show up every day. And I think that differentiates what we do with BetterCulture from some other leadership development or culture initiatives, in that we try to really break things down to be more behavioral than theoretical.
Yeah. Well, the concept of competency in anything is a combination of knowledge, skills, abilities, and attitudes. So that's where culture intersects with the competency of all of your people, is on that attitudes side of the equation. So just trying to connect a few dots for some listeners there, but I love how broadly how broad of an impact you're talking about that culture has on an organization. Brett, I love to talk to engineers. Engineers are an interesting group of people because you can go off and do so many things with an engineering degree. A lot of folks go into engineering thinking I'm going to be stuck there forever. But take us behind the scenes of your decision to leave the field of civil engineering, and how is your experience as an engineer helping you today?
Well, that's something that they certainly sell you when you think about going into engineering, is they say, oh, once you get a degree in that, you'll be prepared to do a whole lot of other things. I'm not sure if I actually believe that. I spent a lot of time learning about concrete and learning about steel reinforcement and learning about, and I haven't really applied those skills in my job since. I suppose they say learning to think, but I don't know. Well, I'm not sure I buy that as much as my high school guidance counselor said it would translate. But I do, as an engineer, I I love the science of it. I just didn't love the daily application. That I liked the theoretical classes, but then by the time you become a junior or a senior in college, they say, okay, you start to see what the job looks like, and it's a 6-month detailed project making construction drawings or something like that. And it's like, whoa, this is different than the science was in the class, the actual practical application. And it just didn't feel like a fit.
Yeah.
And so I, long story I don't want to get into, but there's a gentleman who ended up talking me into taking a job with him. I told him in the interview I did not want to be an engineer. But my parents were trying to get me out of their basement after college graduation. And so they told me I had to go visit with this guy. And by the end of my quote unquote interview, where I told him I didn't want to be an engineer, thanks for the conversation, he said, well, what are you doing on Monday? And I didn't have a good answer to that. So I ended up having to take a job there. And I worked there for 4 years, and he was wonderful, and he kept me interested. But I kept telling him, Tom, I'm not cut out to be an engineer long term, but I was really struggling to figure out what I did want to do.
Right.
And what I ended up realizing is that's because it wasn't because of the job per se. It was just because what I was really looking for was an organization I could really love being a part of.
Yeah.
And I did find an organization. It was right under my nose. My father had started a nonprofit in the Omaha area that was a healthcare rehabilitation company, specialty rehab for folks with catastrophic injuries. And, you know, college kids, you're not paying as much attention as you should be to what your own dad is up to. But that organization kept being recognized as the number one best place to work in the whole city year after year after year. And it wasn't until one of his VPs was nice enough to take me out to lunch and I was asking for some career advice. And she said, well, you do know that's why your dad and our leadership team focuses so much on culture, right? And I kind of said, what do you mean? And she said, well, we have a lot of people that work here that didn't go to college to do exactly their job, but they love what they do because they love the team and they love the company.
Yeah.
And so I ended up taking a job there doing some fundraising and other things and never looked back.
That's awesome. I think it's a great segue then into my next question. Most business leaders share this goal of wanting to be a great or a best place to work. How do you and your firm help leaders achieve and sustain that goal?
The most important thing, if you want to be a best place to work or even just a better place to work, is that you have a strategic plan. You have a plan for how you're going to make continuous progress from where you are to where you want to be. And when we do consulting, when we do strategic planning around culture with our clients, we ask them to make a plan in 5 areas of their organization. And so, in my opinion, if you want to make progress on your culture, you should be able to have an answer to this question: how will I be better a year, 2 years, 3 years from now in these 5 areas? And the first area is the health and the alignment and the chemistry and the effectiveness of our executive team. Okay, starts there. Are they bought in on culture? Do they have great team dynamics? Are they developing individual skill sets to build others and reinforce culture? And so if you're not doing some form of consistent and continuous improvement at the top, the odds are you're not going to have a lot of improvement throughout the organization. So you start there. Second is leaders and managers throughout the organization, right? Managers have an outsized impact on how employees feel about the entire organization. And so if you aren't running effective leadership development offerings for your managers, I would advise that's probably the number one place to invest. The third area is HR systems and people operations systems. So this could be anything from how you onboard employees to, what your communication platforms are to, one-on-one expectations or performance evaluations. But if there isn't something that you're improving consistently in your HR and people operations, or it could be benefits, it could be a bazillion things, but you should be consistently improving things in such a way that it creates a better employee experience and a healthier culture. And then the fourth, I'm almost done. The fourth is emerging leaders. And this is the one that only applies typically to larger organizations. But if you're not doing something to identify and sort of pull closer your emerging leaders, these are the folks that are really painful to have work for an organization for 2 or 3 years and then move on to another opportunity. So you need to have a plan for how you're bringing on and building up emerging leaders and seeing growth year over year there. And then lastly is all employees, giving a really clear radar for what every employee can do to build culture and consistently improving their everyday experience. Again, just finding lots of small wins that you can stack up over time is in all 5 of those areas is how you drive culture strategically going forward.
So I'm hearing organics, authenticity. What I didn't hear in any of that was let's have clear line of sight of winning this award by this time at this point in the future.
No, progress. Progress is the important thing, right? And you get to decide how fast you want to push that progress. I don't promise any of my clients they can be a best place to work next year. What I promise every one of my clients is if they'll work with us for 3 years, they'll be in a better spot than they were when they started.
Yeah, I think sometimes leaders get themselves wrapped around the axle of wanting to have that badge, have that award, that great place to work award on their website, and the culture can actually suffer from that and not grow. So
It is possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a marketing exercise or a public relations exercise, right? To say,
Right.
hey, we want to be recognized as this. We
Right.
want to actually have this. Do that first.
Yeah. Well, Brett, we're going to take a really short break and we'll be right back to talk more about culture. Thank you. Hey everyone, I'd like to invite you to start your weekend with me on the Saturday Morning Muse podcast. I briefly explore topics that span leadership, business management, education, and personal continuous improvement. Subscribe to the Saturday Morning Muse podcast on your favorite podcast streaming app or visit andrewtemte.com for more information. And we're back with Brett Hoogeveen talking about one of my favorite subjects. And I know I say that all the time, but this time it's organizational culture. Now, Brett, in your experience, what's the one thing that will torpedo a journey to improve corporate culture that most leaders aren't thinking about? What has the potential to sneak up on them and ruin it all?
Well, I don't know if this is something that they're truly not thinking about, because this is something that uh, at times becomes painfully obvious. But I will say that I think most people don't think strategically about the fact that if you're not protecting the right of good employees to work with other good employees, that is the number one thing that can submarine a culture. In other words, if you're tolerating people who are not living your values, who are toxic, who are negative, cynical, who are just combative with with the organizational ethos, combative with their managers, combative with the mission, combative with, just feel like they're pulling in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing that tears down culture, is putting up with that.
Yeah.
And so I know we talked, so you'll hear my engineering brain come out from time to time. But if you think about culture, is that okay, Andrew, if I do a mathematical analogy here? Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
I should ask permission before I do something this boring.
Oh, no.
Right?
Math matters. It's another example that math is all around us.
Yes. So if you think of a culture, right? We do engagement surveys, but if you think of a culture as a distribution of employees, you got some employees that are super engaged, super happy. You got a bunch in the middle and some that are not, right?
Yep.
And your culture, if I were to average all of those ways that your employees feel off under a normal curve, your culture is sort of the average of that, right? It's the average health across all these different people and how they feel about their company. Well, one of the fastest ways, just mathematically, to move that average is to subtract, a group of people that are ones and twos and threes, that are on a 10-point scale, that are negative, cynical, etc., and just rehire, like at random would be like worst case scenario. You're going to hire people in that are on a 5 on a 10-point scale. And hopefully we do better than random when we're hiring and screening people. And so I think that's one thing people don't really appreciate to the degree that they should. If you want to build a great place to work, that takes a lot of effort and energy and boosting people up. But one of the fastest ways to make a workplace better is to really address the people that are tearing it down and help them either improve or find some other organization to bless with their company.
Yeah, I do like to talk about this concept. The actively disengaged within your midst, they are, as the phrase describes, they're actively working against the aims of your business. Why would you keep them around?
Why?
And then you've got what I term the genius jerk. So this is somebody, they're adding a great deal of value in some way to the business, but they're making everybody else absolutely crazy with their antics and parading around, and however they're evidencing the jerk side of their genius and tearing down your culture. So I really appreciate you shining a bright light there.
Thank you. And do you agree that it's something that people maybe don't realize how big that impact is? I mean, if 15, 20% of a workforce is actively disengaged, my question is always, what are they doing there?
Right.
Like that's a leader's responsibility to say, hey, how can I change that? And if you can, it'll dramatically change the health of your team or your culture.
or the damage of the phrase, "Oh, that's just Billy," or "Oh, that's just Susie," or that's just them. You ignore those antics. And when your high performers and your mid-tier performers hear that, what they're hearing is that culture really doesn't matter, that my well-being really doesn't matter. So
Yes.
why should I hang around?
100% agree.
Yep. So tell us more about BetterCulture. You've got a product called 20 Tenets.
Yes.
How's that used in your practice?
Oh, this has been so much fun, Andrew, in the last couple of years. For the entirety of my career running a leadership development culture consulting practice, we didn't really realize we were doing it, but we only were thinking from the top down with our clients. We were only thinking, at the executive level, what's our strategy? What's the culture we want? How do we teach leaders to create that culture? And that's important. That top down orientation, leadership does matter. But we hadn't asked the question of, well, is it possible to build a healthier culture thinking from the bottom up instead of just top down? And it is possible. We've spent the last few years coming up with really a listing of, I like to think of it as sort of a universal list of core values, or really across industries, across organizations, everything from cattle ranching operations to high finance and startup tech firms. What does a universal star employee kind of look like? What are the attitudes and behaviors, back to where we started, that they show up with? And we came up, after about 6 months of work, with a list of 20 universal attitudes and behaviors that'll make somebody a star in any work setting. And we've built that into an assessment and a training program that is really delivering nice results, helping organizations build healthier teams and cultures from the bottom up.
And you're going, in the show notes, we're going to have a link to a few of these tools.
Yes, I would love to share. We have 20 of these tenets. And one of the things just recently that we created is what we call our Culture Kickstarter Pack. And that pack gives for free all of the resources for two of the favorite tenets that people like. Tenets related to how to have friendly friction on a team, and how to, what we call, brag them up, which is do PR for your team members in a way that it helps build the reputation of your team. It helps improve customer satisfaction. It helps people feel appreciated and recognized. So we're giving away a whole package of resources that includes self-assessment videos, coaching videos, discussion activities, like all kinds of stuff that we're just begging leaders to use and try to help invest in their people and their teams. So that's at betterculture.com/the balancing act, if anyone would like to find that, as well as in your show notes.
Nice. Excellent. Well, back to the start of the show, I have to ask, you gave a TEDx talk last year with the title, "Stupid Things Leaders Do." As a former chief executive, I'd like to know what the main takeaway from that talk is. What were the stupid things that I was doing?
Well, so, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah. And people across the world, when they hear Omaha, a few things come to mind, but one of them often is there's a couple of pretty smart guys that ran a company out of Omaha called Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah.
Charlie Munger was Warren Buffett's right-hand person for many, many years. And Mr. Munger, in my opinion, is one of the best strategic thinkers that the world has known in a long, long time. And he was really big on this concept of inverting questions, of saying, instead of how could we make the smartest investment possible, he and Warren have made literally billions and billions of dollars, really meaning it when they say, actually, we don't try to make the smartest investments. We just try to avoid the bad ones. We work our tails off to be kind of mediocre investors, but if we just avoid the bad ones, we know we'll significantly outperform. And they've kind of proved that works. And so my talk on the stupid things leaders do follows that same perspective of, maybe if we want to become more effective as leaders, instead of trying to read 10 more leadership books or, take 17 more classes or figure out the next smartest, brilliant thing to do, what if we just avoided the things we're doing today that are actually making our people not appreciate where they work, or not feel motivated or engaged or appreciated, etc. And I think maybe we could become healthier and stronger leaders, not by trying to do more, but by stopping doing the things that are kind of shooting ourselves in the foot.
Excellent. That's a wonderful framing. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Brett, let's close out the show with 3 lightning round questions. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Okay. Well, you've just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or cause. Who do you pick as the recipient?
Well, that's an easy one for me, because I have a close connection with an amazing organization in Omaha that I mentioned earlier in this call, which is called QLI, or Quality, used to be Quality Living Incorporated. And QLI does amazing, life-changing rehabilitation and care for individuals that have been affected by a brain injury or a spinal cord injury. They're the largest non-hospital-based center in the entire country that does the work that they do. And they do amazing work for people that are trying to put their lives back together.
Excellent. And this is why I ask this question, because invariably the guest comes up with something that I'd never heard about before. So thanks for sharing. Question number 2, I give you access to a rudimentary time machine. You can send a message to an earlier version of Brett Hoogeveen. What's the message, and what previous version of yourself do you send it to?
I don't have a good answer on that one. I mean, I know you gave me a heads up you were going to ask me this, and I still don't have a good answer. I mean, I'd probably send stock tips, or I'd probably, do something like that. But I guess, what I would encourage myself to do is to be inquisitive, to try things, to experiment, to not be shy, to take chances and try new things. When I look back at my life, the times when I have taken a leap or done something that stretched me, etc., it's almost always a helpful thing. And so I think maybe that would be the sort of the simplest basic advice that I would give myself is try things, experiment, take chances.
Awesome. Brett, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Personally, I am focused on selling the value of culture. I, for a long time, took it for granted that everybody just understood why culture matters. And a lot of people will nod their head and acknowledge it. But what I'm realizing is very few people that are real business people can make a super direct line to why investing in culture would be good for the bottom line of their business. And it's a huge missed opportunity, Andrew. I think there's a business case that there's as much as 20% of value that a business could be realizing that they're not if they don't have a super engaged, amazing, high-performing culture. And that invisible sort of part of their business that they're just not achieving just isn't, they don't see it. And my goal is to try to make that more visible.
Hence my question from earlier in the show of what you were taking from your experience as a mathematician and engineer into your current space, and bingo, there it is.
There it is, yes.
There it is. Full circle. Because culture matters to the numbers, and a lot of more numerically inclined directive leaders convince themselves that that is not the case, that they cannot be connected, and they are absolutely connected. So
glad to hear you agree.
Yes. Brett, it's been a lovely time getting to know you. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with our listeners today. You've mentioned this website that you've created. Just one more time, where can folks get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn if you look up Brett Hoogeveen, or just go to BetterCulture.com. We have an awesome URL. There's a lot of great resources that are free on our Insights tab. And specifically for your audience, Andrew, I would love them to get our Culture Kickstarter pack for free. And that's at betterculture.com/The Balancing Act.
Excellent. All right, Brett, thank you so much for being here today.
You bet. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, my name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends. And we're also out on YouTube. The show was produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.